My name is Jessica Parker, and at 25, I thought I understood where I stood with my family. That was before I discovered I was excluded from my own sister Emily's engagement party. When confronted, my parents casually dismissed it as just a casual get-together at the country club. Nothing special. The raw betrayal drove me to book a spontaneous flight to Belize that very night. As my plane took off the next morning, I switched off my phone, desperate for escape. Hours later, when I finally turned it back on, I found 37 missed calls and a dozen tearful voicemails. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if family drama stories like mine make you feel less alone in your own struggles. Growing up, Emily and I were more than sisters. We were confidants, co-conspirators, and each other's fiercest defenders. Only 2 years apart, we shared a bedroom with twin beds pushed against opposite walls, the space between filled with whispered conversations long after our parents thought we were asleep. We had our own secret language consisting of made-up words and inside jokes that no one else understood. When neighborhood kids teased me for my braces in 5th grade, it was Emily who confronted them, despite being younger and smaller. When Emily struggled with math in middle school, I spent hours helping her practice equations until they finally clicked. Our bond remained strong through college, even when I moved 3 hours away to Boston University, while she stayed closer to home at the University of Maryland. We maintained weekly video calls every Sunday night, a ritual we protected fiercely despite busy schedules. When I graduated and landed my first marketing job in Boston, Emily visited me every month that first year, helping decorate my tiny studio apartment and exploring the city together. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change. It was subtle at first, a gradual shift that happened after Emily met Ethan Carter at a friend's wedding 2 years ago. Ethan came from money, old money that had been in Baltimore for generations. His family owned property throughout the Northeast and had a reputation for their conservative values and tight-knit social circle. With each passing month after they started dating, our calls became less frequent. Emily would cancel plans last minute, usually with a text that mentioned something about Ethan's family events taking priority. I noticed the change but made excuses for her, telling myself she was just experiencing that all-consuming early relationship phase. Family dynamics had always been somewhat complicated in our house. Our parents, David and Elizabeth Parker, had clear expectations about what success and happiness should look like. Dad built his accounting firm from scratch, and Mum was the perfect supportive spouse who volunteered at church and hosted immaculate dinner parties. They valued tradition, appearances, and following the established path of college, career, marriage, and children, in that order. I had always been the career-focused daughter. After graduating with honors and securing a position at a respected marketing agency in Boston, I threw myself into building my professional reputation. I dated casually, but never felt pressed to settle down. My apartment walls showcased my travel photography rather than family portraits. I had 3 tattoos, all small and meaningful, that my mother pretended not to see at family gatherings. I colored my naturally brown hair with subtle auburn highlights and preferred bold lipstick colors that made my mother wince. Emily, on the other hand, followed the traditional path our parents had envisioned. She became an elementary school teacher, a profession our mother called noble. She lived only 20 minutes from our parents in Bethesda, joined the same church, and volunteered at the same charity functions. Her hair remained its natural blonde, her wardrobe consisted of pastels and modest hemlines, and she seemed perfectly content to adopt our parents' vision of a well-lived life. I never resented our differences until I noticed how my parents' faces would light up when discussing Emily's life choices while merely nodding politely about my promotions or creative projects. When Emily and Ethan got engaged after 18 months of dating, I found out through a group text that included extended family members and close friends. Despite a momentary sting at not being told personally before the announcement, I felt genuine happiness for my sister. Ethan seemed to adore her, and she glowed whenever he was around. That evening, I called her immediately after seeing the text. "I am so happy for you, Emily," I exclaimed, truly meaning it despite the lingering hurt of finding out alongside everyone else. "Tell me everything. How did he propose?" Emily's voice bubbled with excitement as she described Ethan's elaborate proposal at his family's estate in Annapolis, complete with rose petals and a photographer hiding in the bushes to capture the moment. I listened intently, asking questions and sharing in her joy. "You know, I want to help with anything you need," I offered. "I can come home next weekend and we can start looking at venues or dresses or whatever you want." "That would be amazing," Emily responded, though I noticed a slight hesitation in her voice. "Let me check with Ethan's mum first. She's really excited to help plan everything." I brushed aside the comment, assuming she was just being considerate of her future mother-in-law. The next day, I spent 3 hours searching for the perfect congratulatory gift, finally settling on a custom photo album with their initials engraved on the leather cover and a gift certificate for a couple's photography session. When the gift arrived at her apartment, Emily called to thank me. "This is so thoughtful, Jessica. You always know exactly what to get. That's what maids of honor do," I replied cheerfully, assuming that role would naturally be mine given our closeness. The silence that followed lasted a beat too long. "About that," Emily finally said, "I haven't really decided on the wedding party yet. Ethan has a lot of sisters and female cousins, so we're still figuring out numbers and everything." That was the first real warning sign, a small red flag I chose to ignore. In the weeks that followed, more concerning patterns emerged. Whenever I asked about engagement celebration plans, my parents would quickly change the subject. When I mentioned booking time off work for pre-wedding events, my mother would say vaguely, "Oh, don't worry about that yet. Nothing's been decided." Despite being supposedly undecided, I noticed my parents having hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when I entered the room. My text to Emily about dress shopping or venue visits went unanswered for days, only to receive brief replies like, "Still figuring things out," or "Ethan's mum has it handled." Not once was I consulted about any plans, despite wedding planning being part of my professional skill set. I coordinated corporate events for major clients. Yet my input wasn't sought for my own sister's celebration. Still, I tried to remain positive, telling myself that wedding planning was stressful and that everything would normalize once the initial excitement settled down. I couldn't have known then how deeply I was being excluded or how the truth would shatter the image I had of my family forever. The first truly suspicious moment came on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after the engagement announcement. I was scrolling through Instagram while waiting for takeout when I stopped on a post from my cousin Olivia. The photo showed her holding up what looked like a formal invitation with a caption that read, "So excited for Emily and Ethan's big engagement party next month. Time to shop for a new dress. Family celebration #engagement party." My finger hovered over the screen as confusion washed over me. Engagement party? What engagement party? I zoomed in on the photo, making out the elegant script on the cream-colored cardstock. It was clearly a formal invitation to a celebration at the Baltimore Country Club, scheduled for 3 weeks from that date. I took a screenshot and stared at it, trying to make sense of why I hadn't received an invitation or even heard this event mentioned. Maybe mine was lost in the mail, or perhaps it was a surprise and Olivia had accidentally ruined it. But that didn't make sense either, since I would need to know about it to attend. The following day, I decided to casually mention it during my weekly phone call with my parents. "So, I saw something about an engagement party for Emily and Ethan at the Baltimore Country Club," I said, keeping my tone light to give them an opportunity to explain. My mother's nervous laugh immediately set off alarm bells. "Oh, that? It's just a small get-together that Ethan's parents wanted to host. Nothing formal. But the invitation Olivia posted looked pretty formal," I countered. "When were you going to tell me about it?" My father cleared his throat in that way he does when he's uncomfortable. You know how busy you are with work, sweetheart. We figured you wouldn't be able to make it anyway for just a casual event. It's mostly Ethan's family's business associates and some of their country club friends. Plus, my mother added quickly, you know how you feel about those stuffy country club events. You always say they're boring and pretentious. Their explanations felt rehearsed, as if they'd anticipated this conversation. And while it was true I'd complained about some of their country club functions in the past, this was entirely different. This was my sister's engagement celebration. Shouldn't that be my choice to make? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. I would want to be there for Emily, regardless of the setting. Of course, honey, my mother said soothingly, but it really isn't that important. The real celebrations will come later with the wedding. After hanging up, I immediately texted Emily. Just heard about the engagement party at the Baltimore Country Club. Looking forward to it. Need me to help with anything? Her response didn't come until the following morning. It's just something Ethan's parents insisted on organising, mostly their friends. Don't worry about it. I tried again. I'd still like to be there to celebrate with you. Should I RSVP directly to them? This time her reply took even longer. It's really not a big deal. Super boring stuff. We'll do something fun, just us, later, promise. When I suggested meeting for lunch that weekend to catch up, she claimed she was swamped with wedding planning errands. I offered to join and help, but she declined. Ethan's mum has a whole schedule planned. Rain check? That rain check never materialised. Every attempt I made to connect with my sister over the next week was met with vague excuses and cancelled plans. Confused and increasingly hurt, I confided in my best friend Claire over drinks at our favourite bar in Boston that Friday night. Wait, they're having a formal engagement party and didn't invite you? That's messed up, Claire said, her expression reflecting the outrage I felt but had been suppressing. They keep saying it's not a big deal, just a casual get-together, I explained, twisting my cocktail napkin nervously. Claire's eyebrows shot up. At the Baltimore Country Club? That place has a 6-month waiting list for events and a strict dress code. That's not casual anything. I don't understand what's happening, I admitted, feeling tears threatening. Emily and I have always been close. Why would she exclude me from something like this? Claire reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Could it be Ethan's family? Maybe they're the type who want to control everything and everyone. I realised with a start that I had only met Ethan's parents once briefly, at a dinner shortly after they started dating. They had been polite but reserved, asking pointed questions about my career and personal life that felt more like an assessment than genuine interest. Maybe, I conceded, but wouldn't Emily stand up for me? And why would my parents go along with it? Because they're trying to impress the wealthy in-laws, Claire suggested. You said Ethan's family is really well connected. Her words planted a seed of doubt that would grow over the coming days. That night I barely slept, replaying every interaction with my family over the past month, searching for clues I might have missed. I recalled other occasions when my parents had prioritised Emily's needs or wants over mine, instances I had dismissed as inconsequential at the time. There was my college graduation when they left early because Emily had a minor dance recital that evening. The time they rescheduled our traditional family Christmas because Emily and Ethan wanted to spend part of the holiday with his family. The subtle suggestions that my career focus was somehow a phase I would outgrow when I found the right man, while Emily's choices were celebrated as ideal. Had I been blind to a pattern that had existed my entire life? Was I the outsider in my own family? These questions circled in my mind as dawn broke, leaving me exhausted and more uncertain than ever about where I truly stood with the people I loved most. My growing suspicions drove me to investigate further. I called my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, who had always been more straightforward than my parents. Aunt Susan, I'm confused about Emily's engagement party. My parents made it sound like it's nothing special, but I saw Olivia's post with a formal invitation. Her hesitation spoke volumes before she even answered. Oh, Jessica, I assumed you knew. It's quite a formal affair. The Carters have invited over 100 people. Your uncle and I already bought new outfits. 100 people? I repeated, my stomach sinking. Yes, dear. Ethan's family has invited several prominent Baltimore families. I heard they even hired that celebrity chef from the cooking show Your Mother Loves Next. I reached out to my cousin Daniel, who had always been honest with me. His awkward confirmation added more painful details, including that there would be a live string quartet and professional photographers. Increasingly desperate for answers, I found myself doing something I'd never imagined, searching social media for clues. My efforts paid off when I discovered the Instagram account of Elegant Boston Events, a high-end wedding planning company. Their recent posts included teasers of an upcoming engagement celebration at the Baltimore Country Club on the exact date of Emily's party. Though they didn't mention names, the color scheme of blush pink and gold matched Emily's favorite colors. One post showed sample place settings with elaborate calligraphy cards and fresh orchid centerpieces. Another revealed custom cocktail napkins with E&E monogrammed in gold. The most revealing post mentioned formal attire required and showed the interior of the club's grand ballroom being transformed with crystal chandeliers and white rose arrangements. This was no casual get-together. This was an extravagant celebration that had clearly been in planning for weeks, if not months. Armed with this evidence, I confronted my parents again, this time with screenshots ready on my phone when I arrived at their house unannounced on Sunday afternoon. I know about the formal party, I said without preamble as I sat at their kitchen table. I know about the 100-plus guests, the celebrity chef, the string quartet, and the professional photographers. What I don't know is why everyone's lying to me about it. My mother's eyes immediately welled with tears, a reaction that once would have made me backpedal and apologize, but not this time. It's complicated, honey, she said, reaching for my hand, which I pulled away. My father's response was less sympathetic. Sometimes things aren't about you, Jessica, he said, his tone carrying an edge I rarely heard. Your sister is marrying into an important family, and there are certain expectations. What expectations exclude a sister from an engagement party? I demanded. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We just want what's best for Emily. This is such an important time for her and for Ethan's family, my father added pointedly. They're very traditional, very concerned with appearances. What does that have to do with me? The uncomfortable silence that followed was eventually broken by my mother's soft voice. Just let your sister have her moment, Jessica. Please don't make this difficult. I left their house more confused and hurt than before, their non-answers fueling my worst fears about the real reason for my exclusion. But the most painful revelation came 2 days later from my cousin Ava, who called me after hearing about my visit to my parents. I can't stand seeing you hurt like this, she said after confirming I was alone and sitting down. You deserve to know the truth. According to Ava, Ethan's wealthy, conservative family had expressed concerns about my inclusion in wedding events. They found your lifestyle choices problematic, she said, the term so vague it could encompass anything from my career focus to my occasional social media posts supporting progressive causes. They specifically mentioned your tattoos, Ava continued reluctantly, and the fact that you're not, in their words, settled down at your age. There was something about some photos from that music festival last summer where you were, dressed inappropriately. I remembered those photos taken at Lollapalooza in Chicago, where I'd worn a crop top and shorts like most attendees in the August heat, hardly scandalous, but apparently offensive to the Carters' sensibilities. And Emily? My parents? They're just going along with this. My voice cracked despite my effort to stay composed. Emily didn't want to cause problems with her future in-laws, Ava explained gently. And your parents? They're worried about damaging the relationship with the Carters. Ethan's father has apparently offered to introduce your dad to some high-profile potential clients. The betrayal cut deep, knowing my sister had chosen appeasing her future in-laws over defending me, and that my parents had agreed to the exclusion to keep the peace and potentially benefit financially. With shaking hands, I called Emily that evening, determined to hear the truth from her directly. "I know everything, Emily," I said when she answered, my voice steadier than I felt, "about why I'm not invited to the engagement party." Her silence confirmed Ava's story before she finally spoke. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. You could have started with the truth," I replied, "instead of letting me find out from others that your fiancé's family thinks I'm not good enough to attend your engagement party." "It's not like that," she protested weakly. "They're just traditional and they're contributing a lot financially to the wedding and everything. So I'm being excluded because they're paying." "Please try to understand," she pleaded. "This is really important for Ethan and me. His family has connections that will help our future. Can't you just understand this once? Understand being hidden away like some shameful secret from my own sister's engagement party?" The pain in my chest was physical now, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. "It's just one event," she said. "You'll be at the wedding, of course." "Will I? Or will that depend on whether I remove my tattoos and pretend to be someone else by then?" The conversation ended with both of us in tears and nothing resolved. I spent that night curled up on my couch, the full weight of betrayal sinking in. Everyone had known except me. My parents had helped craft the lie. My sister had prioritized her new family over her relationship with me. Sleep eluded me as I scrolled through years of photos of Emily and me, wondering if our close relationship had been an illusion all along. By morning, my sadness had calcified into something harder, a protective shell around my wounded heart. 2 days later, still reeling from Emily's confirmation, I made an impulsive decision to drive to my parents' home in Bethesda after work. I hadn't called ahead, hoping to catch them off guard and finally have an honest conversation about everything that had happened. As I pulled into their driveway around 7:30, I noticed both their cars were there, but decided against ringing the doorbell. Instead, I used my key to let myself in quietly, wanting a moment to compose myself before the inevitable confrontation. I had just closed the front door when I heard my mother's voice floating from the kitchen, her tone hushed but clear in the quiet house. "We told Jessica it's nothing special, just a casual get-together." I think she believed us. I froze, hand still on the door handle as my father's deeper voice responded. "She'll get over it. You know how dramatic she can be sometimes. Remember the fuss she made when we missed that art show of hers in college?" My mother sighed audibly. "I just hope she doesn't find out about the real party until after it's over." Mrs. Carter was very specific about wanting a certain atmosphere. She mentioned Jessica's Instagram photos again yesterday. "This is why I told the girls to be careful about what they post online," my father grumbled. "Professional reputation matters." Well, Ethan's mother said she was concerned Jessica might cause a scene or embarrass them in front of their friends. "Something about her being too outspoken," my mother added. "Emily actually seemed relieved when we agreed Jessica shouldn't come," my mother continued. "She said they've grown apart anyway, since she met Ethan." "Good thing we're only showing Jessica the casual family photos afterward," my father added. "No need for her to see what she missed." Mrs. Carter made a comment about Jessica's inability to fit in with proper society, my mother said, her voice dropping even lower. She asked if she was adopted. Rather than gasping or crying out, I found myself retreating silently, backing toward the door I'd entered through moments before. I slipped outside without making a sound, the cool evening air a shock against my flushed face. In my car, parked down the street where they wouldn't see it from the kitchen window, I finally allowed the tears to come. They weren't the hot, angry tears I might have expected, but quiet ones that seemed to drain something essential from me with each drop. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur, muscle memory guiding me home while my mind replayed fragments of the conversation I'd overheard. Each word was another small cut, another confirmation that the family I thought I had, the relationships I had valued and nurtured, were built on conditions I had failed to meet. My apartment felt unusually silent when I entered, the familiar space suddenly alien. I moved from room to room, touching objects that represented my life, the choices I'd made, the person I'd become. Photos of travels taken alone or with friends rather than family, books that had shaped my worldview, the framed certificate of my marketing award from last year that my parents had acknowledged with a brief, "That's nice, dear." In my bedroom, I caught sight of my reflection in the full-length mirror, tattoos visible on my wrist and ankle, auburn highlights catching the light. Was this really so offensive, so inappropriate, that I needed to be hidden away from proper society? Or was it simply that I had chosen a different path, one that didn't prioritize their approval? The realization hit me with stunning clarity. This pattern had existed my entire life. Every time I chose authenticity over conformity, there had been subtle punishments, small exclusions, gentle redirections. The engagement party was merely the most blatant example of something that had been happening for years. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, a plan forming through the haze of emotional exhaustion. Within minutes, I was browsing flight options, my cursor hovering over destinations I'd saved for someday. Belize, with its lush rainforests and pristine beaches, called to me from the screen. Before I could second-guess myself, I booked a flight leaving the next morning from Logan International Airport, using the savings I'd been building for a kitchen renovation. The confirmation email pinged in my inbox at 1:30 in the morning, a digital permission slip to escape. I packed methodically despite my exhaustion, selecting clothes suitable for tropical weather and adventure, deliberately including items my family might deem inappropriate. Crop tops, shorts, the bikini I'd bought but never worn due to lingering body consciousness instilled by my mother's subtle criticisms. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I composed a brief email to my supervisor, explaining that a family emergency required immediate leave, requesting 2 weeks off against my accumulated vacation time. Professional, even in crisis, I attached a brief outline of where my current project stood and suggestions for temporary reassignments. As dawn broke, I scribbled a note on my kitchen notepad. "Enjoy the party, don't worry about me." I left it on my counter, knowing my parents had a spare key they'd likely use when I didn't respond to calls. The note's brevity was deliberate, offering no explanations or locations, no opportunity for them to follow or interfere. The Uber arrived at 5:30, city streets quiet as we headed toward Logan. I felt strangely calm, as if I'd stepped outside my body and was watching someone else make these bold, impulsive decisions. Only when the plane lifted off the runway did I finally switch off my phone, cutting the last tether to the life and family I was temporarily leaving behind. The moment the plane lifted off, a weight lifted from my chest. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without that constricting pressure of betrayal. As Boston shrank beneath us, I felt a surge of liberation, a wild exhilaration mixed with lingering sadness. My phone, now powered down and tucked into my bag, represented all the expectations and explanations I was temporarily abandoning. 7 hours later, stepping out of the Belize City Airport into the humid afternoon was like entering another world. The air was heavy with unfamiliar scents, rich earth and tropical blooms. Palm trees swayed against a perfectly blue sky, so different from the grey Boston spring I'd left behind. I caught a shuttle to Placencia, a coastal area known for its beaches and coral reefs. My home for the next 2 weeks was a small beachside hotel called Casa del Mar, a collection of brightly painted bungalows set among flowering gardens. The modest establishment was run by a local family, and as I checked it in, the owner's daughter, Isabella, welcomed me with a genuine warmth I hadn't experienced in too long. "Just you travelling?" she asked, handing me a cold glass of fresh pineapple juice. "Yes, just me," I answered, surprised by how right those words felt. My bungalow was simple but charming, with a small porch facing the ocean. That first evening, I sat there as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, watching the waves roll in and listening to unfamiliar bird calls. The vastness of the ocean before me put my problems into perspective, making them seem smaller against the backdrop of such natural majesty. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since discovering the engagement party deception, the combination of emotional exhaustion, travel fatigue, and the rhythmic sound of waves creating the perfect sedative. I woke to sunlight filtering through bamboo blinds, momentarily disoriented before remembering my impulsive escape. After a breakfast of fresh tropical fruits and strong Belizean coffee, I wandered down to the beach where I spread my towel on the warm sand and opened a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The simple pleasure of reading without interruption, without checking my phone every few minutes, felt like an indulgence I'd denied myself too long. Around midday, I noticed a young woman about my age setting up a small table near the beach entrance with a sign advertising eco-tours. Something about her open, friendly face made me approach. "Are you looking for adventure?" she asked in accented English, offering me a brochure. "I'm Lucia. My family runs tours to the reefs and surrounding areas." "I might be," I replied, surprising myself. Adventure wasn't typically what I sought on vacations, preferring museums and restaurants to physical challenges. Lucia studied my face with unexpected perceptiveness. "You look sad," she observed candidly, "like you came here to escape something." Her directness was refreshing after months of evasions and half-truths from my family. "Is it that obvious?" She smiled gently. "Many people come to Belize running from something. The difference is whether they also find something to run toward." That conversation led to my first real adventure, a guided snorkeling trip to the Belize Barrier Reef the next morning with Lucia as my guide and 4 other travellers. A retired couple from Ontario, Mark and Linda, and 2 solo female travellers in their 30s, Sophie from New Zealand and Rachel from Portland. As we explored vibrant coral reefs and swam with colourful fish, our small group fell into easy conversation. By the time we stopped at a secluded beach for lunch, I felt comfortable enough to share pieces of my story. When Sophie asked why I was travelling alone, I began, "My sister's getting married." And somehow the whole story spilled out, the beautiful tropical setting a stark contrast to the ugly family dynamics I was describing. Instead of the awkward silence I feared, I was met with validating outrage and understanding. "Your own sister excluded you because her in-laws think you're not proper enough," Sophie exclaimed. "That's absolute nonsense." "My brother did something similar," Rachel shared. "His wife decided I wasn't refined enough for their vineyard wedding. It hurt for years until I realized it reflected their insecurities, not my worth." "You did the right thing coming here," Mark added, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sometimes you need distance to see clearly." Their validation was a balm to my wounded spirit. These strangers could see the injustice clearly without the complicated history and dynamics that my family used to normalize their behavior. Over the next few days, I joined this newly formed travel group for more adventures. I found myself kayaking through mangroves despite a lifelong fear of deep water, laughing as I navigated the calm channels, the adrenaline burning away layers of hurt. I hiked to hidden waterfalls, learned to paddleboard on gentle waves, and volunteered one morning at a manatee conservation project, carefully monitoring their habitats. Each new experience built my confidence, reminding me that I was capable and brave in ways my family never acknowledged. During a beach bonfire on our 6th night in Belize, Lucia introduced us to her grandfather, Miguel, an elderly man with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes, who shared stories of growing up in the area before tourism changed the landscape. When the others wandered off to swim in the moonlight, Miguel remained beside me, his presence calming. "Lucia says you carry sadness with you," he said simply, poking at the fire with a stick. I nodded, watching sparks rise toward the star-filled sky. "Family?" he asked. And again, I nodded. The most beautiful shells on the beach are the ones the ocean has tumbled the longest, he said after a thoughtful pause. The rough edges become smooth, the inside iridescent. But first, they must endure the waves. His words stayed with me that night as I began writing in the journal I'd impulsively purchased at the hotel gift shop. The pages filled with thoughts and feelings I'd never fully articulated, even to myself, about my family's conditional acceptance and my own journey towards self-worth. On my 8th day in Belize, I met Margaret, a 60-something solo traveller with silver hair and an infectious laugh, who joined our growing group of friends. During a sunset kayak trip, Margaret paddled alongside me, sharing her own story of family estrangement. My parents disowned me when I divorced my abusive husband, she told me. They believed divorce was a sin, no matter the circumstances. For years, I tried to win back their approval, diminishing myself in the process. What changed? I asked, watching a pelican dive into the water nearby. I stopped seeking their validation and built a life that made me proud, surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. Eventually, some family members came around, others never did. I learned to be at peace with both outcomes. Her story resonated deeply, highlighting my own pattern of seeking approval from people unwilling or unable to give it. How many decisions had I second-guessed because I anticipated my parents' disapproval? How often had I defended my choices rather than simply living them confidently? The turning point came on the morning of my 11th day in Belize. I woke before dawn and walked alone to the beach, settling on the sand to watch the sun rise over the Caribbean. As golden light spread across the water, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity. My worth wasn't determined by my family's acceptance. Their inability to embrace the authentic me reflected their limitations, not mine. I had built a life in Boston filled with meaningful work, true friendships, and experiences that brought me joy. That life was valuable and valid, regardless of whether it matched my parents' vision or earned my sister's loyalty. In that moment, I made a decision. I would return to Boston, not as a wounded victim seeking reconciliation at any cost, but as a woman who knew her own worth. I would set boundaries with my family, making my continued presence in their lives contingent on basic respect. And if they couldn't meet that standard, I would create a chosen family from the loving friends who accepted me fully. For the first time since discovering the engagement party deception, I felt strong enough to eventually confront my family without my emotional response being dependent on their reaction. I could speak my truth without needing them to validate it. That realization was more freeing than the spontaneous flight to Belize had been. The remaining days of my trip took on a celebratory quality. I laughed more easily, tried new foods without hesitation, and connected more deeply with my travel companions. I got a small tattoo of a manatee on my shoulder blade, commemorating both the conservation work and my personal transformation, adding to the collection of body art that had somehow factored into my family's rejection. On my final evening, our group gathered for a farewell dinner at a beachside restaurant. Under string lights and stars, we shared addresses and social media handles, promising to stay connected. "What will you do when you go back?" Lucia asked, as we walked along the beach one last time. "Face my family," I replied, "but on my terms this time." She nodded approvingly. The Jessica who arrived 2 weeks ago could not have done that. But this Jessica, she gestured to all of me, she is ready. That night, I finally turned on my phone, prepared for the barrage of notifications that would certainly await me. I needed to know what I would be facing when I returned to prepare my strategy for the inevitable confrontations. What I wasn't prepared for was just how many messages there would be or what they would reveal about the chaos my disappearance had caused within my family. My phone buzzed continuously for nearly 5 minutes as delayed notifications flooded in. 57 missed calls, 36 voicemails, over 100 text messages, multiple emails marked urgent, notifications from every social media platform I used. I sat cross-legged on my bungalow bed, taking deep breaths as I prepared to wade through the digital evidence of my family's reaction to my disappearance. I started with the earliest texts sent the day after I'd left. From Mum, "Jessica, please call us. We're worried." From Dad, "Your mother is upset. Call home immediately." From Emily, "Where are you? Mum and Dad are freaking out." These early messages carried an undercurrent of annoyance rather than genuine concern, as if my absence was an inconvenience rather than a cause for worry. But as I scrolled through to messages sent days later, the tone shifted dramatically. From Mum, please just let us know you're alive. We're desperate." From Dad, "We've contacted the police. If you get this, please respond." From Emily, "Jessica, I am so sorry for everything. Please be okay. Please come home." The voicemails told a similar story of escalating panic. The first few were irritated demands to call back. By the fifth day, my mother was sobbing into the phone, my father's voice cracking as he pleaded for any sign I was safe. Emily's messages were the most surprising, raw with emotion and repeated apologies. "I never meant to hurt you," she cried in one message. "I was so stupid and shallow. Please be okay. I can't lose my sister." Even Ethan had called, his usual confident tone replaced with genuine concern. "Jessica, this is Ethan. Whatever you think of me or my family, please contact Emily. She hasn't slept in days. The engagement party doesn't matter. Nothing matters except knowing you're safe." Emails revealed another layer of the situation. My supervisor had written, expressing concern after my parents had contacted my workplace multiple times. A colleague mentioned that a police officer had come by, asking questions about my usual haunts and state of mind before disappearing. The most revealing information came from texts between me and Claire, who had apparently been questioned extensively by my family. From Claire, "Your parents showed up at my apartment today. They think you've done something drastic. I told them you're stronger than that, but they're not listening. They're falling apart." Another from Claire, "Emily came by too. She's a mess. Said the engagement party was a disaster, that she had some kind of breakdown in the middle of it when someone asked about you. Apparently, she told Ethan's mother off in front of everyone. Call me when you can. It's chaos." I scrolled further, piecing together what had happened in my absence through Claire's updates. According to Claire, the engagement party had been held despite my disappearance, though with a cloud hanging over the celebration. Tensions had been high from the start, with my parents anxiously checking their phones throughout the evening. The breaking point came during dinner when Ethan's mother reportedly made a comment about family members who couldn't maintain appropriate standards. Emily, already stressed about my whereabouts, had stood up and publicly called out the hypocrisy of excluding her sister for not meeting arbitrary social standards while claiming to value family. This had led to an ugly scene where Ethan's parents expressed their disappointment in Emily's outburst, causing Ethan to defend her. The argument escalated until Emily declared she was postponing wedding plans until I was found safe. Ethan's parents had left the party early, along with many of their friends, leaving my parents to make awkward explanations to remaining guests. What should have been a joyful celebration had devolved into a family crisis, played out in front of Baltimore's elite social circle. In the days that followed, according to Claire's messages, my parents had filed a missing person report. Emily had put all wedding planning on hold, and relatives from across the country had been contacted for information about my possible whereabouts. The final message from Claire, sent just yesterday, mentioned that a local news station had run a brief segment about my disappearance, complete with my photo and a number to call with information. I sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. My absence had not only been noticed, but had catalyzed a complete upheaval in my family. The engagement party they had prioritized over my feelings had been ruined. The relationships they had sought to protect with the Carters were damaged, and most surprisingly, my sister had apparently found her voice and her loyalty to me when faced with my potential loss. Part of me, A small, vindictive part I wasn't proud of felt a grim satisfaction. They had excluded me, dismissed my feelings, and lied to my face, and it had all backfired spectacularly. But the larger part of me felt a complicated mix of guilt for causing such worry and hope that perhaps this crisis had forced some genuine reflection. I stepped out onto my bungalow's small porch, gazing at the ocean as I contemplated my next move. The moon cast a silver path across the water, reminding me of Lucia's grandfather's words about shells becoming beautiful through tumbling in the waves. After nearly an hour of consideration, I composed a single text message and sent it to my parents, Emily and Claire. "I am safe, needed time alone, will be in touch soon." The response was immediate, my phone lighting up with calls I wasn't ready to answer. Instead, I silenced it and returned to the porch, breathing in the salt air and listening to the rhythm of the waves. The next morning, Lucia found me at breakfast, sliding into the chair opposite mine with concern in her eyes. "You look troubled," she observed. "Bad news from home?" I explained the situation, showing her some of the messages and describing the apparent meltdown my disappearance had triggered. "They care about you," she said simply. "Whatever mistakes they made, your absence showed them what matters." "Or they just don't like the embarrassment I caused," I countered, still uncertain about their true motivations. Lucia shook her head. "People don't react that way to mere embarrassment. That's fear of losing someone they love." Her perspective helped me see the situation with more compassion, though I remained cautious about assuming too much had changed. That evening, I sent another brief message. "Returning to Boston in 3 days. Will contact you then." This time, I included my flight details, a small concession to ease their immediate worry while maintaining the boundary of no direct communication until I was ready. My final days in Belize were spent preparing emotionally for what awaited me at home. Margaret, who had experienced her own family reconciliation, helped me practice what I would say in various scenarios. "Remember, you're not asking for their approval anymore," she reminded me as we walked along the beach. "You're stating your terms for remaining in relationship with them." There's a world of difference between those positions. Sophie and Rachel took me out for a courage-building snorkeling adventure on my last full day, insisting that physical bravery would remind me of my emotional strength. "If you can swim with sharks," Sophie said as we dove into the reef, "you can certainly face your family with your head high." As I glided through the water, surrounded by vibrant marine life, I released the last of my fear about returning home. Whatever happened with my family, I had found something valuable in Belize, a core of self-worth that couldn't be shaken by their judgment or approval. On my final night, Lucia and her family hosted a farewell dinner for those of us departing. Under the stars, Miguel raised his glass in a toast. "To brave travelers," he said, his eyes meeting mine, "who came searching for paradise but found themselves instead." I boarded my flight the next morning with a lighter heart than I'd expected, ready to face whatever awaited me in Boston. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at the lush green landscape that had sheltered and transformed me, silently thanking it for the gifts it had given. The journey home gave me time to finalize my approach. I would not rush into a family reunion filled with emotional reactions. Instead, I would meet them on neutral ground, maintain my composure, and clearly articulate both the hurt they had caused and my expectations moving forward. As the plane began its descent into Logan, I looked at my reflection in the window, noting my sun-kissed skin, lighter hair, and the calm confidence in my eyes that hadn't been there 2 weeks earlier. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The Boston air felt cooler than I remembered as I stepped out of Logan, though it was technically warmer than when I'd left. 2 weeks in tropical Belize had reset my internal thermostat, just as it had recalibrated many other aspects of my life. I had texted Claire from the airport, asking if I could stay with her for a few days, rather than returning immediately to my apartment, where my family might be waiting. She met me at arrivals, wrapping me in a fierce hug before pulling back to examine me. Look at you, she said, taking in my tanned skin and the new confidence in my posture. You seem different. I am, I replied simply, knowing a full explanation would take more time than we had in the busy pickup zone. At her apartment, over takeout and wine, I shared the story of my impulsive escape and the transformation that had occurred in Belize. Claire listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, and occasionally shaking her head in amazement. So, what's your plan now? She asked, as I finished recounting my journey. I'm meeting them tomorrow, I explained. Neutral ground, a coffee shop downtown, where none of us are likely to make a scene. And what will you say? I took a deep breath, recalling the conversations I'd practiced with Margaret on the beaches of Placencia. The truth, that they hurt me deeply, that I'll remain in their lives only if they can respect me as I am, not as they wish I would be. Claire raised her wineglass in salute. To boundaries and self-respect. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care in clothes that represented my authentic self. A stylish but professional outfit that included visible tattoos and my natural hairstyling. This wasn't about provocation, but about presenting my true self without apology. I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, selecting a quiet corner table with enough privacy for our conversation. As I sipped an Americano, I focused on maintaining the inner calm I'd cultivated in Belize, refusing to let anxiety overtake me. My parents arrived first, looking haggard in a way I'd never seen before. My mother's eyes were puffy from crying, my father's usually perfect posture slightly stooped. They spotted me immediately, relief washing over their faces. My mother rushed forward, arms outstretched, but stopped short when I didn't rise to meet her embrace. Instead, I gestured to the chairs across from me, maintaining the emotional and physical space I needed for this conversation. Jessica, my mother breathed, sliding into her seat. Thank God you're safe. We've been out of our minds with worry. I'm sorry you were worried, I said calmly. That wasn't my intention. I just needed space to process everything that happened. Emily arrived moments later, Ethan surprisingly by her side. My sister's face was pale beneath hastily applied makeup, dark circles under her eyes suggesting many sleepless nights. Ethan looked equally tired, but met my gaze directly, something he'd rarely done in our previous interactions. Once they were seated, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I allowed it to stretch, observing their reactions. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, my father cleared his throat repeatedly, and Emily blinked back tears while gripping Ethan's hand. Finally, I spoke. I want to acknowledge that my sudden departure caused you pain and worry. That wasn't my goal, and I'm sorry for the distress it caused. My mother reached across the table, trying to take my hand. Honey, we're just so glad you're home. We can forget all about that engagement party business. I gently moved my hand beyond her reach. I didn't come back to pretend nothing happened. I came back because I'm ready to address what happened and decide where we go from here. My father's eyebrows rose at my tone, so different from my usual people-pleasing approach to family conflict. Jessica, we made a mistake. We admit that. But disappearing for 2 weeks without a word was extreme. What was extreme, I countered evenly, was discovering that my family conspired to exclude me from an important celebration because I didn't meet someone else's standards of propriety. What was extreme was hearing my own parents discuss how I would embarrass them and planning to lie to me about it. My mother gasped. You heard that conversation? I came to talk to you that night, I said. I let myself in while you were in the kitchen talking about me. Emily's tears spilled over. Jessica, I am so sorry. I was weak and stupid. I let Ethan's parents intimidate me, and I betrayed you in the worst way. Ethan cleared his throat. I owe you an apology too. I should have stood up to my parents from the beginning. Their behavior was inexcusable. His directness surprised me. What changed? Emily and Ethan exchanged glances before she answered. Everything. When you disappeared, nothing else mattered anymore. I realized what I'd done, how I'd hurt the person who's always been there for me. The engagement party was a disaster, Ethan added. Emily finally told my mother exactly what she thought about the way they'd treated you. I told her that if they couldn't accept my sister, they couldn't accept me either, Emily said, a hint of newfound strength in her voice. I said I wouldn't marry into a family that judged people by such shallow standards. My father leaned forward. It caused quite the scene, but it needed to be said. You're defending Emily's outburst? I asked, genuinely surprised. Yes, he admitted. Your disappearance. It forced us to reevaluate everything, the priorities we'd set, the values we'd compromised. He ran a hand over his face. When we thought we might have lost you, nothing else mattered. Not the Carters, not social standing, nothing. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue. We've been such fools, Jessica. I keep thinking about all the times we made you feel less important, less valued than your sister. All the times we tried to mold you into something you never wanted to be instead of celebrating the amazing woman you actually are. Their words were everything I would have longed to hear before Belize. Now I received them with cautious appreciation rather than desperate relief. I appreciate what you're saying, I told them, but I need you to understand something. I didn't come back expecting apologies, though they're welcome. I came back to establish how our relationship will work moving forward, if it continues at all. The shock on their faces might have amused me under different circumstances. What do you mean, if it continues? My father asked, alarm evident in his tone. I mean that I'm no longer willing to be part of a family dynamic where my worth is conditional, where I'm tolerated rather than celebrated, where I'm excluded when inconvenient. I laid out my terms clearly and calmly. I would attend family functions, including Emily's eventual wedding, as my authentic self. No comments about my appearance, career choices, or personal life would be tolerated. If Ethan's family couldn't accept me, that was their problem to manage, not mine to solve by becoming invisible. And if these terms aren't acceptable to you, I concluded, then we'll need to acknowledge that and adjust our relationship accordingly. I'd rather have limited honest contact than regular interactions based on pretense. A stunned silence followed my declaration. Finally, Emily spoke. I want my sister back, she said simply, on your terms, whatever that takes. Ethan nodded. And I've already told my parents they need to reevaluate their priorities if they want to be part of our lives. The wedding is postponed until we figure everything out. My parents exchanged glances before my father responded. We want a relationship with you, Jessica. We've been wrong, terribly wrong. If you're willing to give us a chance to prove we can change, we'd be grateful. It won't be easy, I cautioned them. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. We're willing to try, my mother said, to really try. We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. There were tears and difficult moments, but also genuine connection unlike anything we'd shared before. No topic was off limits, from their subtle favoritism to my own withdrawal and defensive behaviors. We left the coffee shop with tentative plans for a family dinner the following weekend, one that would include me fully and authentically. As we parted ways outside, Emily hung back to speak with me privately. Thank you for giving us another chance, she said, her eyes still red from crying. I don't deserve it. This isn't about what any of us deserve, I replied. It's about what we choose to build together moving forward. She hugged me tightly, and for the first time in months, I hugged her back without reservation. In the weeks that followed, our family began the slow process of rebuilding trust. My parents made visible efforts to change, attending therapy sessions to address their conditional parenting patterns. My father even surprised me by asking thoughtful questions about my tattoos, genuinely curious about their meaning rather than silently disapproving. Emily stood firm in her demands that Ethan's family treat me with respect, a stance that eventually led to a stiffly polite but functional relationship with my future in-laws. The wedding was rescheduled for the following spring, with me officially asked to be maid of honor in a tearful conversation that felt like a true new beginning. My own transformation continued as well. I maintained connections with my Belizean friends, planning a reunion trip the following year. Lucia's family welcomed me via video calls, becoming a chosen family that expanded my sense of belonging beyond biological connections. At work, I negotiated a more flexible schedule that allowed occasional remote work, creating space for both career advancement and personal fulfillment. I began therapy to address my own patterns of seeking validation and avoiding conflict, gradually building healthier relationship skills. My apartment, once simply a place to sleep between work shifts, transformed into a true home filled with mementos from Belize and photos of my expanding circle of friends. The kitchen renovation I'd postponed for my impulsive trip became a weekend project shared with Emily, rebuilding our relationship one tile at a time. 6 months after my return, I sat on my newly renovated balcony watching a Boston sunset that, while different from Belize's, held its own beauty. As I journaled about the day's events, I reflected on how far we'd all come. The healing wasn't perfect or complete. There were still uncomfortable moments, old patterns that occasionally resurfaced, but there was also authentic connection, genuine effort, and a new foundation built on mutual respect rather than conformity. Sometimes we need to leave to be truly seen. Sometimes the bravest act isn't standing and fighting, but walking away until we're strong enough to return on our own terms. I had learned that loving my family didn't mean accepting disrespect, and that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for genuine relationships. The journey toward healing isn't a straight line, but a winding path with setbacks and unexpected turns. Yet each step forward, however small, moves us closer to wholeness. In losing what I thought was my only family, I had found a larger community of connection. And in standing firm in my authentic self, I had paradoxically created space for deeper family bonds than I'd ever thought possible. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to find yourself or set boundaries that changed a relationship forever? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button to help others find this channel. Remember, sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most profound transformations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on yours.